Ladies and gentlemen, we gather in a world that celebrates velocity, of technology, of thought, of love, yet so often forgets the quieter forces that hold it all together. Tonight, I want to explore something that seems personal on the surface, yet reaches into the deepest circuitry of the human brain, the decision to share a life with another person, to publicly declare a partnership that is at once intimate and universal. When people hear about wedding plans, they imagine flowers, music, a timeline. But as a neuroscientist might tell you, the real story begins far earlier, in the synaptic storms of the mind, in the electric patterns that guide every human bond. Long before an invitation is sent, the brain begins its delicate choreography. Oxytocin pulses when trust forms. Dopamine surges when anticipation builds. These are not mere chemicals. They are the architecture of devotion, as real and as intricate as any spacecraft or circuit board. I've spent years obsessed with how systems evolve, whether in the vacuum of space or the labyrinth of the cortex. And I've come to believe that committing to another person is a kind of frontier mission. It's a launch. You study the trajectory, weigh the payload of history and hope, then light the engines and accept that the path will curve with gravity you cannot fully predict. Consider what neuroscience reveals about long-term partnership. Functional MRI scans show that couples who stay deeply connected after decades still exhibit the same activation in the ventral tegmental area as they did in the first flush of romance. That's the brain's reward center, the same region that fires when we solve a problem that once seemed impossible. In other words, lasting love is not a slow fading of excitement. It is a sustained innovation, a continuous upgrading of shared experience. People ask why someone known for relentless ambition would take the time to build a personal union. The truth is that ambition without grounding is merely escape velocity without orbit. A rocket can leave Earth, but without a precise burn at the right moment, it drifts into endless cold. Relationship is that burn. It creates a stable path, a gravitational dance between two massive bodies, each influencing the other while still following its own arc around the sun. Real life, of course, is more chaotic than orbital mechanics. I've faced public scrutiny, professional turbulence, and the kind of personal upheaval that can make even the strongest engineer doubt the structural integrity of the heart. But science reminds us that stress itself can deepen a bond when handled with mutual respect. Cortisol spikes are tempered by shared laughter. The amygdala's alarms quiet when a trusted voice says, "I'm here." And so, when I speak of wedding plans, I'm not unveiling a date or a guest list. I'm inviting you into an experiment in human potential. How do two people, both fiercely independent, design a life that is both resilient and free? How do we code for curiosity inside a commitment that must also offer safety? These are not just personal questions. They are questions of civilization, because the stability of societies, like the stability of orbits, depends on bonds that can absorb shock without breaking. Think of the great partnerships that have shaped history, Marie and Pierre Curie, whose shared fascination with invisible forces changed medicine, the Wright brothers, siblings united by the dream of flight, couples whose names we'll never know, but whose steady devotion carried families, communities, entire cultures through darkness. Neuroscience shows that our species evolved not through the survival of the solitary, but through the power of cooperative attachment. To build is to bond. When I first began to contemplate marriage again, I approached it the way I approach any monumental project, by gathering data. I read studies on attachment theory, resilience, and the neurobiology of trust. I spoke with elders whose relationships had outlasted wars and revolutions. I listened to children who understand more about unconditional presence than any textbook could capture. What emerged was not a formula, but a patterns. Lasting unions thrive when both people commit to perpetual learning about each other, about themselves, about the changing universe they inhabit. And here is the paradox. While we can map neural pathways and chart hormonal cycles, the essence of love remains gloriously unpredictable. It is the one frontier that resists complete simulation. We can approximate it with algorithms, but no artificial intelligence can replicate the sudden, inexplicable certainty of recognizing another soul as a home. This is where the scientist meets the dreamer. To promise a future together is to accept risk, to admit that not every variable can be controlled. Yet risk is the price of any grand endeavor. Whether launching a reusable rocket or building a shared life, the thrill lies in venturing where failure is possible and progress is transformative. So as I stand here, speaking of wedding plans, understand that the plan is less about a single day than about a lifetime of exploration. It is about designing a partnership with the same rigor we apply to engineering challenges and the same openness we bring to art. It is about creating an ecosystem where both individuals can expand without limit, where love is not a cage, but a propulsion system. It is about acknowledging that the human brain is wired for growth, that neural plasticity allows us to rewrite our own patterns, and that a partnership can become the most powerful laboratory for that kind of rewiring. When two people remain curious, when they approach each other not as static entities, but as evolving constellations of experience and possibility, the relationship itself becomes a generator of innovation. In the early stages of any great endeavor, there is always turbulence. Pilots know it. Scientists know it. Lovers know it. Our nervous systems are primed to respond to change with caution. The amygdala fires its warnings. This is unfamiliar. This could be dangerous. Yet the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason and foresight, invites us to step forward anyway. Commitment is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to keep moving despite fear, to trust that the shared mission is worth the occasional rough air. I have watched how, in high-stakes engineering projects, the best teams navigate setbacks. They don't hide errors, they surface them quickly, examine them openly, and integrate the lessons into the next iteration. Marriage demands the same transparency. It thrives on the willingness to expose vulnerabilities, to debug the code of misunderstanding before it metastasizes into silence. This is not romantic in the conventional sense, but it is profoundly loving, because real love is not the avoidance of conflict. It is the courage to engage with it and emerge wiser. There is also a profound neurochemical truth here. Studies show that couples who regularly engage in difficult but constructive conversations have healthier stress responses. Their bodies release more oxytocin afterward, reinforcing trust and connection. It's as though the brain rewards honesty with a stronger bond, just as muscles grow stronger after resistance training. Love, then, is not a fragile glass sculpture. It is a living system strengthened by the very challenges it faces. When people imagine a wedding, they often focus on the spectacle, the music, the lights, the choreography of a single day. But the ceremony is only a threshold. The deeper work begins in the quiet moments that follow, in the daily choices that no photographer will capture. Neuroscience calls this the default mode network, the brain's state when we are at rest, when we daydream or reflect. In a long partnership, those restful states become interwoven. Two minds develop a shared rhythm, even a shared memory architecture. Over years, couples can finish each other's sentences not out of habit, but because their neural maps have become subtly synchronized. Think of that for a moment. Two distinct human beings, each with their own history and ambitions, gradually shaping a common mental landscape. It is one of the most extraordinary feats of biological and emotional engineering imaginable. And it cannot be forced. It requires patience, empathy, and a respect for the other's autonomy. Paradoxically, the more freedom each person grants the other, the stronger the shared terrain becomes. This is why I speak of wedding plans not as an endpoint, but as a launch pad. The real adventure is in building a life where both individuals can continue to explore. Exploration, after all, is the heartbeat of our species. We crossed oceans and deserts, we reached for the stars, because we are wired to seek the unknown. A great marriage channels that same drive inward, transforming everyday existence into an ongoing expedition. And like any expedition, it requires a clear sense of mission. Not a rigid blueprint. Life will always surprise us, but a set of guiding values. For me, those values are curiosity, resilience, and shared purpose. Curiosity keeps the relationship alive. Resilience allows it to weather inevitable storms. Shared purpose gives it direction, like a north star that remains visible even when the sky is overcast. I often think about how civilizations themselves are built on these principles. Families form the smallest units of society, and their stability, or fragility, echoes outward. Anthropologists have documented how communities with strong, supportive partnerships tend to innovate more and recover faster from crisis. The science suggests that when two people build a resilient bond, they contribute not only to their own happiness, but to the broader fabric of progress. There is, of course, an emotional dimension that transcends data. There are moments when all the neuroscience and sociology fall away, when what remains is simply the quiet awe of standing next to someone who sees you completely and still says yes. That moment defies explanation, and perhaps that is the point. The universe is vast and largely indifferent, yet within it we find this improbable intimacy. To me, that is as miraculous as any distant galaxy. I have experienced failure, loss, and reinvention more times than I can count. Each time, I have been reminded that nothing of lasting value is achieved without vulnerability. A wedding, at its heart, is a public act of vulnerability. It is saying to the world we do not know what the future holds, but we choose each other anyway. That choice, repeated day after day, is what gives the ceremony its true significance. So when you hear about plans, understand them as a commitment to continuous discovery. It is not about perfect timing or flawless execution. It is about building a vessel strong enough to cross unknown seas and flexible enough to adapt when the winds shift. It is about constructing a partnership where love is not a static noun, but an active verb, a force that propels both people toward their fullest potential. Imagine standing at the edge of a great launch. The countdown is real, the engines are primed, but the destination is not a fixed coordinate. It is an open horizon, a shared decision to journey together into the evolving cosmos of human possibility. That is the promise I am making, not just for a day, but for a lifetime of exploration. In that spirit of exploration, let's talk about the landscapes no telescope can chart the inner ones. Every relationship is a microcosm of the larger universe. Dynamic, filled with dark matter we don't fully understand, yet held together by forces as real as gravity. Neuroscience tells us that our brains are predictive machines, forever trying to map the future. But when we step into a committed partnership, we accept that some coordinates remain unknowable. We learn to navigate by trust, by empathy, by the quiet certainty that even when the terrain changes, we will keep walking together. One of the most powerful discoveries in modern brain research is that of limbic resonance, the phenomenon in which two nervous systems attune to each other. Heart rates synchronize, breathing patterns align, even immune responses can shift when people share a deep bond. It's as if, at a biological level, we become part of one another's operating system. This isn't poetry, it's measurable science. And yet it feels like poetry because it reminds us that love is not just an idea, it is embodied, cellular, alive. I've seen this resonance not only in couples, but in teams that build rockets, in scientists who collaborate across decades, in communities that rebuild after disaster. When human beings align around a shared purpose, something greater emerges. The whole becomes more than the sum of its parts. That is the promise of a wedding, two individuals agreeing to create a shared field where possibility multiplies. But possibility is not a guarantee. It must be nurtured. Partnerships thrive when both people remain students of each other, Curiosity is oxygen for love. The moment we believe we fully know someone, we stop exploring, and exploration is what keeps the mind and the heart alive. I want a life where questions outnumber answers, where we never stop being astonished by each other's depths. Of course, astonishment isn't always comfortable. There will be failures, moments when the mission seems off course. I've faced those moments in engineering labs and in personal life alike. What matters is how we respond. Resilience isn't about denying difficulty, it's about metabolizing it into strength. In the brain, this is called neuroplasticity, the capacity to rewire in response to challenge. In a marriage, it means turning obstacles into opportunities to grow closer, to build a story together that could not exist without the struggle. Consider the story of an elderly couple I once met while traveling. They had been married for 70 years. When I asked for their secret, they laughed and said, "We were willing to be surprised by each other, even when we thought we knew everything." Their eyes held the gleam of adventurers who had crossed countless storms and still found wonder in the daily sunrise. That is the kind of longevity I aspire to, not measured only in years, but in the sustained capacity to marvel. When planning a wedding, it's tempting to focus on aesthetics, the venue, the music, the symbolism of the rings. Those details have their place, but they are not the essence. The essence is the decision to build a shared future that honors both individuality and union. It's designing a home, physical and emotional, where innovation thrives, where laughter is as essential as air, where silence can be comfortable because it is filled with trust. This decision also carries a larger responsibility. Our world is complex, sometimes fractious. Stable, loving partnerships ripple outward, influencing communities, shaping cultures, even affecting the next generation's neural development. Children raised in environments of secure attachment often show greater creativity and resilience. In that sense, a wedding is not just personal, it is profoundly civic. It is a commitment to contribute to the social fabric, to help build a society capable of compassion and discovery. And yet, for all this weight, love remains delightfully unruly. No algorithm can predict the exact moment when a glance becomes a lifelong vow. No data set can capture the sudden acceleration of the heart when you realize that the future you once imagined alone now feels incomplete without another. That unpredictability is not a flaw. It is the spark that keeps us reaching for one another across the vastness. As the day of the ceremony approaches, I find myself reflecting less on logistics and more on gratitude. Gratitude for every experience, joyful or painful, that led to this point. Gratitude for the person who chooses to stand beside me, not because life will be easy, but because it will be real. Gratitude for the chance to build something enduring in a world where so much is fleeting. So, when I finally step forward to speak vows, they will not be a script recited for tradition's sake. They will be a living promise to keep exploring, to keep learning, to keep venturing into the unknown together. They will be an acknowledgement that love is the greatest experiment of all, one that challenges us to be both fearless and tender, both dreamer and scientist. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that the future of humanity depends as much on these quiet, steadfast bonds as it does on our boldest technological leaps. Rockets and research can carry us to distant planets, but it is love, messy, miraculous, human love, that will make those planets worth inhabiting. That is why I choose to celebrate this union, not as an escape from the larger mission, but as its fulfillment. Because in the end, every frontier we cross, whether into space, into knowledge, or into another heart, reminds us of the same truth: we are not meant to journey alone, and there is no greater adventure than to discover, day after day, that another soul has chosen to journey with you. Thank you.